Well, good morning, Travis.
Morning.
What day is it today?
Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the time?
What time is it? 10 o'clock? 10:15? 10:30 maybe? It's pitch practice number 2 time,
It's
so
pitch
all the
practice
teams
number
are
2.
out doing their pitch practices.
Oh, cool.
They know what time it is.
Yeah. Fantastic. So we are here at Startup Weekend and the sign just fell. But that's how it is. Let's just keep rolling.
Where did that breeze come from?
I guess it's really fun when you see it from behind the scenes.
All right, so it's Sunday, Startup Weekend 2019. The teams are doing their pitch practices, like you said. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Who I am. My name is Travis Cornwall. I am a facilitator for Startup Weekend. I'm from Wellington and part of the org crew down there. My background outside of Startup Weekend, I'm a management consultant by trade. I work in big organisations helping with strategy, process, business development, all those sorts of good things to make businesses run better. On the very big organisation side, I predominantly work in banking and finance, which is why I love Startup Weekend, because you've got this very seed idea of, I have an idea and how do we make this work. So I like to see both sides. I've got the big organisations on one end and then the small startups on the other.
Gotcha, Travis. So tell us how then you actually came to be exposed to the world of startups.
So it was through my job. I got told by a colleague, go check out Startup Weekend. It's happening in Wellington. You'll love it. Went along. He was right. I had the most fantastic experience of the year, I imagine. This was a couple of years ago now. I think the most important thing for me from that was it was probably the best team experience of my life. Formed this amazing team around a really quite heartfelt concept. Got to know these people extremely well over the course of a weekend, and that's, for me, what Startup Weekend is about, being a part of a really awesome team.
Cool. So that was when you caught the bug of startups, and I'm guessing ever since then you've been attending all sorts of hackathons?
Yeah, exactly. So that was really my first experience into the world of what a sort of hackathon startup weekend can be. I got in touch with the org crew there and I said, look, this is awesome, how do I be more involved? So from there, became part of the org crew last year. We ran a fantastic event with the support of the Defence Force on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. And then this year, took over the running of the show, learned how to facilitate the weekend, which is what I'm here to do today, and we ran our first event in Wellington earlier in the year.
Very cool. So you mentioned that the first hackathon that you kind of organised was with the Defence Force. So that kind of leads to, I guess, the idea that these hackathons aren't just for startups. So that's a very interesting point that I'd like to touch on a bit later. But first, I guess we should probably define, well, what's a hackathon?
What's a hackathon? Well, for me, a hackathon is somewhere you go to build something. Mm-hmm. You take an idea and you take it through to concept. Startup Weekend takes that idea one step further and says, how do you build something that is economically and sustainable? And how do you actually build a functioning business off the back of it over the course of a single weekend? I like to think of Startup Weekend as a festival. And the reason I say that is because the high energy from the moment you walk in the door to the moment you walk out again. It's go, go, go the whole time. There's music, there's atmosphere, everything's going strong.
Gotcha. So it's about business validation as well as building something.
Exactly. So the teams are judged on 3 areas. One is validating the problem that they're facing and the solution that they're delivering. One on how they execute, which is obviously super important. What can you actually build over the course of a weekend? And I'm always amazed and surprised by what the teams can come up with. They can have fully functional prototypes right through to physical product demos. Recently, in our event in Wellington, the winning team ended up brewing mead over the course of the weekend and sold that out on the street, and also sold it during their pitch, which was awesome. And then the third and final part is around that business model, which I think is so critical, and that important element of what are you doing this for? And it's making something that can sustain itself, build, grow, and be economically viable.
Right, so it's not just a technology solution, it can be just anything that solves a problem
Yeah, Startup Weekend is for any sort of business. There's obviously a lot of solutions and ideas, and businesses these days have a tech focus, but it's more than just that. The winner of Startup Weekend Tauranga earlier in the year was a solution around sustainable hairdressing. As I say, last year's winner was in Wellington around the humanitarian assistance, was a company called Situate Me, who is still running. And their whole idea was around helping people who are stuck in emergency situations to keep them calm and feed them information using a whole range of different networks. So if the internet's down, using cell phones. If the cell phones are down, using radio, radar, a whole bunch of different solutions.
That's really cool. And so after Startup Weekend, what's usually the next step?
What's the next step? Usually there's a few weeks of, oof, what have we got into? The energy of Startup Weekend is such that you kind of feel unstoppable. Part of the weekend we like to instill is that you've got to keep validating as you go along. So usually the next step for a lot of companies that decide to continue on post-weekend is to do some more in-depth validation of what they're doing. Really go out, do some more heavy market research in order to prove that their business is solving a problem, and also that their solution will solve that problem.
Cool. Now let's backtrack a bit, actually, and talk about what's the format of one of these. Oh, you're right.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's my wallet popping out the side.
Right. Tell us about the format of a hackathon. Like, talk me through, a team coming in on a Friday or an individual coming on a Friday, because I'm guessing the teams probably aren't formed at that stage.
Yeah, exactly.
And then talk me through to what's going to be essentially happening this evening.
Exactly that. So the format's really cool, and it's a process that seems to work again and again. Everybody comes in on the Friday night. We encourage people to come by themselves, bring friends, whatever. The more the merrier in this sense. You get the chance to do a pitch on the first night. You've got only a minute, and you say who you are, what problem you've got, and what your solution is. Usually about half of the participants will do a pitch over that time, and then there's a voting process. From that, a number of ideas are chosen, teams are formed. Friday night's critical for forming those teams, and as I said, forming that team is the part that I hold most dear. So that's my favourite part of the weekend, is watching those teams form, get to know one another. From there, it's build and validate, iterating and going through the Startup Weekend process. Saturday is all about getting out and speaking to customers, validating problems and validating solutions, and then starting to build out and executing whatever it is their solution that they're doing. Of course, business model is really important as well. Teams often leave that late till Sunday morning. I know there's some teams around here now who are still trying to figure out how their thing is going to be economically viable, but that's all part of the challenge from Startup Weekend. The teams are lucky they get 3 pitch practices over the course of the weekend in preparation for their final pitch practice, which happens on the Sunday night. That's where there's a panel of judges. There's usually prizes to go around for the winning teams who can fulfill those 3 criteria of validation, execution, and business model.
Right, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the part of this that is close to your heart. You mentioned facilitation. I've seen these kind of team forming, scenarios that it's chaos. How do you actually facilitate that? Like, how do you make that happen?
I like to think of it as organised chaos. There is a process for getting it through. So as I say, there's a massive voting process to sort of highlight what are the cool ideas here that a lot of people are interested in. We usually have a number of rules in place to ensure that your teams aren't too big or too small, and we really encourage people to mingle, talk about ideas. So you work through that voting process, teams start to form, and it's actually a lot more organic than you'd think. Once people start talking, they go, this is a really cool idea, I'm a designer, do you need a designer? Usually the person who has the idea goes, absolutely. The thing with Startup Weekend, everyone's here to learn and to take on new things and to do new things. So everyone's open and willing to do that. No one's here to hide their ideas. That's not the purpose of Startup Weekend. So the team forming is actually quite organic once the pitches have been made.
Right. So Travis, what actually makes a good team? from your experience?
From my experience, team's the most important part. I think getting to know each other on a Friday night is absolutely critical. From my own experience, my first startup weekend, we formed a team around quite a passionate, emotive idea. And our first Friday evening, we just sat around a table for 2 hours and spoke about our own experiences in that world and how we thought we could help. We didn't dive into the solution. We didn't even dive into our lean canvas or filling out what we were actually trying to solve. We just spoke broadly about ourselves and who we were. By the time we came in Saturday morning, we were connected, close, and from there we could deliver and smash it out over the weekend.
Right. So what I'm kind of gathering from that is, at first and foremost, it's a bunch of humans, right? And as humans, you've got to get to know each other and understand each other's strengths. So if you spend a bit of time doing that, then you might execute better rather than jumping right into building something.
Exactly.
Right. Cool. Okay. And in terms of roles and responsibilities, what's the typical makeup that you've seen? Does it vary, or is it kind of organically go into one sort of model?
Yeah, it actually does vary. We try to encourage the rule of no CEOs, but sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes there's people who are really naturally leaders and like to manage, and some teammates work really well in that environment. Other times there's fully democratic teams that all sort of dish out and do different ideas, and it comes back to quite an organic development. We've also got a range of mentors, and my role as facilitator is to ensure that everyone within each team is having their say, is being listened and being heard.
Right, so a bit of conflict resolution there, I'm guessing, as well, which I'm guessing is just a natural part of these weekends.
Exactly. It goes back to your point. Everyone here is human. Not everybody's going to get along necessarily. So especially when you're put in a high-stress environment like a startup weekend, you're literally together for 2 days straight with people that you don't know. So there's always going to be a bit of interest, but everybody gets through it, I suppose.
Yeah. Cool. So, Travis, you've obviously been through a few of these in your time. What are the key learnings that you've kind of taken away from having facilitated and participated in a few hackathons?
Startup Weekend is all about doing, and it's all about speed. So on that, getting something done is better than getting something perfect. Some people will like to get hung up on getting the idea exactly right or getting the solution exactly right. We really like to encourage done, move on. Speed of decision making is super critical. Especially in a team environment, it's often tempting to do roundtables and try and get a consensus. Often a quick vote, get the decision done, move on. You've only got 2 days. You don't have time to spend ages agonising over a decision that may not actually be that important down the line. You're really trying to gun for that Sunday night and make the most of it. The other thing that we really push over the course of the weekend is validating everything. Every assumption that you have should have a data point behind it to say it. So that's going and speaking to your customers, that's doing market research, that's doing surveys, all those sorts of good things to be able to prove, yes, we believe this because the data backs it up.
Gotcha. And now let's flip that around. What if I was going into a hackathon for the first time, what would you tell me not to do? What are some pitfalls that I should be avoiding?
Don't get married to your idea. An idea in this world is worth very little compared to the execution. There are no points for a great idea, but there are points for execution. So focus in on actually delivering on your idea. If your team picks your idea up and runs in another direction with it, go with it. There's nothing wrong with being able to just take the idea and going.
For sure. So, on a final note, let's talk about why are these events important? Why are hackathons important? Maybe not just to startups, but just to, the wider tech community or, businesses. Why are these events important?
There's a few different lenses, I think, to look at it from. I got into it from a personal lens. I saw this world as somewhere that I could grow and develop myself. So, as a facilitator, I like to think there's 3 purposes of a weekend. One is for people to learn, and that's from participants to mentors to judges to even to myself as a facilitator, learning something every weekend. The beauty of this weekend is everyone wears many hats and you're all doing different stuff. So you should be coming into a weekend and learning something, whatever it is, taking yourself outside your comfort zone. I think it's also really important that the weekends inspire people. Startup Weekend's all about inspiring entrepreneurs, and this is such an awesome environment for it. It's action-oriented, it's go, go, go. The final one, which is probably my favourite, is that it's all about networking. You have these events where you've got 60, 70, 100 people coming along, from people who are students to people who have done their own startups. You have people who come to Startup Weekends that have done 20, 30 Startup Weekends in the past. So they've got a lot of knowledge and depth, especially when you bring in the mentors with that, who have started their own businesses or work in the industry. They bring a lot of value, and getting to know those people is hugely beneficial. And that kind of brings it on to what Startup Weekend is for the community. And it really is that seed intro idea of bringing in new people, introducing them to the idea of what being an entrepreneur can be, and bringing that ecosystem in.
No, that's definitely true. And I guess to add to that, I've also personally for myself found that I could try different roles that I wouldn't normally be trying in my everyday life or my workplace. I could put on a hat that I wouldn't normally put on and just be like, hey, what would I be like as a designer or product manager, and I want to try that out. So these weekends are great opportunities to do that. Even being a mentor, it's just a great opportunity to give back and facilitate. So that's kind of, for me personally, what I've kind of found as well. Awesome. So where do people find out about Startup Weekend, and how do they keep in touch and find out when the next one is if they want to go?
Yeah, so Startup Weekends happen all the time, all over New Zealand and all over the world as well. Actually, this weekend there's 46 Startup Weekends happening worldwide.
Wow.
Everywhere from Iraq to Azerbaijan, France, Germany. There's about 10 in Brazil this weekend, the US. So you can literally go anywhere in the world. In New Zealand, obviously here at Startup Weekend Auckland, first time in a couple of years, which is fantastic to see. I'm from Wellington, we have them every year. There's also heaps in the regions, including Christchurch, Dunedin, Queenstown, Nelson, New Plymouth, Tairāwhiti, up in Gisborne, Tauranga, and we're always looking to build them out. So if you're a community leader in a region that has never done a startup weekend, whether that's the Bay of Plenty or Palmerston North or other parts of the South Island, we're really looking to help those communities grow and develop. It's very much a community-driven piece. It's all volunteers that do this work, which is awesome. So the more that regions want to take these in and do it, the better. Plug into your local ecosystems and your local communities. Google Startup Weekend New Zealand or Startup Weekend your region. Follow the Techstars page, who organise Startup Weekends globally, and follow your nose.
Follow your nose. Awesome, Travis. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think it's probably time to get back and see where the teams are at with their pitches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. And cut.
Cut.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh my god. Amazing.
Amazing.
Can you be here and clap like that all the time?